Hey y'all, I think I might have got you a little excited before, and I told you that you had reached your last video, and you really did reach your last video for geometry, but now I think you've reached your last video for the year, unless they decide to extend the school year. Then this is the last video for our factoring unit, which will be our last unit for the year. So let's talk about grouping, and then you can be on your way. So for grouping, we're going to end up with a four-term polynomial. So you know this looks different than what we've seen in the previous four videos. I have a third power here, and I have one, two, three, four terms. So we're going to do kind of what we did when we were doing the AC method for factoring trinomials, and we're going to group two terms together, and they're going to be two terms where we can factor out a greatest common factor, and then we can end up with factors of this polynomial. So in this example, it's kind of set up nicely. You might feel good about this because you've practiced with the AC method. I know I can factor a 4 and a 4 out of 4 and 8, and a 5 and a 5 out of 5 and 10. So the way these are set up, I'm going to group them like that. So the greatest common factor between 4n cubed and 8n squared is 4n squared. And I'm left with n plus 2. And now I should realize I need to end up with a factor of n plus 2 when I work with 5n and 10. So I'm going to factor out a negative 5 from both. And I'm left with n plus 2. Because negative 10 divided by negative 5 is positive 2. Now I can factor out n plus 2 from both of those. And I'm left with 4n squared minus 5. And I have just factored in a couple steps a four-term polynomial where I have a cubed. And again, very similar to the AC method, minus the multiplying a times c and all that. All we need to do is the grouping portion. So I'll continue to have to shrink these down. I only gave you two this time, so try those two, do grouping, and factor each of those polynomials. So this first one's set up nicely again. I can see a 5 comes out of 5 and 20, and a 6 comes out of 6 and 24. So the greatest common factor here is 5t cubed, which leaves me with t plus 4. Greatest common factor here is 6, which leaves me with t plus 4. Now I can just tidy this up, factor out a t plus 4. I'm left with 5t cubed plus 6. Over here, set up nicely again. Now if you encounter a problem where they're not set up nicely, it's okay to move around the terms just so long as the negative goes with the 14w and it also goes with the 7. But these are nicely set up. So in 2w cubed plus w squared, the greatest common factor is w squared. When I take that out, I get a 2w plus 1. Now I need to end up with a 2w plus 1. So in order to not get a minus, I'll factor out a negative 7 in both of these. And I'll be left with 2w plus 1. Factor out that 2w plus 1. I'm left with w squared minus 7. And that guy is factored. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to group, but we're going to have to go a little bit further. If you remember in the special cases video and the practice, the third example, we had to factor out a common factor at the beginning. In this case, we're going to factor out common factors at the end. So we'll start the same as we did in those just previous problems. and we're going to group together. And it looks like I can group 12p to the 4 with 36p squared. So I'm going to rewrite this. And here I can factor out 12p squared. And I'm left here with p squared minus 3. And over here I can factor out a 10p I'm left with p squared minus 3. So now I'll factor out my p squared minus 3 like I would have in the past. I'm left with 12p squared plus 10p. And it takes, again, a little bit of practice. This thing is not completely factored yet. 12p squared and 10p, they do have a greatest common factor, so I need to factor that out. And that is 2p. So I'm actually going to move my p squared minus 3 to the end of this. And that's okay. It doesn't matter which order we multiply in. So then when I factor this and I pull out a factor of 2p, I can write it at the beginning. And I'm left with 6p plus 5. And now the thing is completely factored. You could have left the p squared minus 3 in front, but it's always good to have the monomial, the one-term factor, at the front of your completely factored polynomial. So go ahead, I have one of these for you to practice. I'm going easy on you. Pause the video. I don't have to shrink the text this time. And try this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this alone. You probably could reorganize this and factor out a greatest common factor for 45m to the 4th and 30m squared. So if you did that, that's fine. But I'm going to just find a common factor here of 45m to the 4th minus 9m cubed, which would be 9m cubed. So I'm left with 5m minus 1. And here I can factor out a sorry about that, a 6m. And I'm left with 5m minus 1. Again, I'm going to factor out the 5m minus 1. And I have some left to do. And again, I'm going to move this 5m minus 1 to the other side, because I have to factor a greatest common factor out of this 9m cubed plus 6m, which is 3m. And I'm left with 3m squared plus 2 times 5m minus 1. There you go, the very, very last you try for this school year. 2 questions, finish strong, try these. If you have questions, be ready to ask.